Hi, intro students. This is part 2 of our Warhol lecture. I want to preface by saying that we're going to shift into more of the critique that Warhol's making through his work, which is often misunderstood because his work on the surface is very kind of glossy and attractive and popularized to the point where it's very consumable by the general public as something that they want or is in line with something that they might want to engage with. So that's by design, and when analyzed and thought of in terms of what Warhol's intentions were, in a lot of ways, the critique he's making is pretty dark. And so Warhol here, he's depicting mass-produced consumer products like we've talked about, and mimics the production of the cultural products. So thinking of how they act in the world as things at our disposal. So we're trained to not think of where products come from, but as resources available to us when we want them and how we want them. And I would say this, although we're much more conscientious of this today, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, in the height of the work he's making, this is not so. So he starts to use images of humans now, whereas before he was, we've talked about, and he's using products like Coca-Cola or Scrubs brushes. And so here he's starting to shift into putting images of humans through this. And this is going to be important to understanding the broader umbrella of his critique. So this is 1962, and this is Liz Taylor, who is a famous and popular actress of the day, and this is a screen-printed portrait of her. So the way we start to understand his critique is through understanding not only what he's depicting, but how he's depicting it in that process we talked about. So in this sense, he's using mass-produced images. So he's using Liz Taylor, which is an image that you can find reproduced over and over and over again. And so in this sense, we're going to use this terminology, this human commodification, and turning humans into commodities. So in economics, a commodity is a marketable item produced to satisfy wants and needs. Economic commodities comprise of goods and services. So is Warhol saying that people have become commodities? The image of Liz Taylor originates as a printed image he sources that has already been mass-produced. This becomes one of the most popular images he uses time and time again, and this is Marilyn from 1962. And the image that's sourced for this work is taken from a publicity still from the movie Niagara from 1953. So looking at this image, these portraits, Warhol receives them from his environment, a portrait of Marilyn Monroe, and creates a series of portrait paintings in 62. This is the year of her death. We've seen now still life paintings, landscape paintings, and portraits, all similar to this 17th Dutch program of painting. I'm not going to expect you to know or understand that, but it's important if you dig into his work that you know that he is taking up the style and program and historic traditions of this particular period of painting as a way of framing his work. And so in this, if we look at the colors here, he's altering these and bringing the kind of program of this Dutch painting into the present. So the color palette mimics the kind of plasticity of everything. So how chemical and artificial makeup of the day is, and uses it in these kind of bright and unrealistic colors. And so the lipstick is almost chemical-like. This is called Gold Marilyn from 1962. And why I put this next to this image on the right, this iconic religious image, is important to understanding, again, the references he's making and how we've turned our commodification of celebrities and this kind of cult of personality into a religion of sorts. And so what's the difference here, right? Gold is the space of light, holiness. It's the presence of gold. It's immaterial. That's why it's used here on the right. The figures are stylized and flattened because they are not supposed to be real, right? The Madonna and the Child are more than the image can hold. We talked about that idea of not being too realistic in terms of religious iconography, because then it would be blasphemous on some level. You would be worshiping an idol or the object rather than the Madonna and Child as a concept or as a religious entity. So in Warhol's, the gold seems more like spray paint, not precious. So on the left here, this is this kind of present adaptation. She's flat, but not because she's holy, but because it's temporary, it's cheap, it's all surface, no person, just a replica, and it's empty. Those are all really important things to recognize when he's making these references, using this gold. He's doing that, again, intentionally. He's heightening our attention to how we use these images of these real people, and we commodify them, we reproduce them over and over and cheapen them, and try to elevate them, but we, in doing so, end up creating these empty replicas. So he starts to do this repetition now. And we talked about the modernist grid here. He's starting to use this grid, again, as a way of detaching it from, detaching Marilyn from being human, right? Although we know that she's human, and so much so that she's, as a celebrity, consumed to the point of isolation, and possibly in this case, at the expense of her own mental health. So Warhol states about his process: somebody should be able to do all my paintings for me. The reasons I'm painting this way is that I want to be like a machine. I think it would be terrific if everybody was alike. I think everybody should be a machine. I don't feel like I'm representing the main sex symbols of our time in some of my pictures such as Marilyn and Elizabeth Taylor. I just see Monroe as another person. As for whether it's symbolical to paint Monroe in such violent colors, it's beauty, and she's beautiful. And if something's beautiful, it's just pretty colors, that's all, or something. There was no profound reason for doing the Death series, no victims of their time. There was no reason for doing it at all, just a surface reason. So the important thing here is to recognize that he's being sarcastic. He's when he ends this statement, these are actually the exact things he's doing and what he means. Right? The lips, they're taken from Marilyn and reproduced. Right? They're divorced from the body. They're objectified. They become an object themselves. Or the degradation through the repetition, the replica, the repeating through the screen printing process to the point that the screen degrades and no more ink can get through. Iconography of consumption, right? Marilyn's image is treated the same way as the Campbell soup cans he's made. This is art historian Jonathan Feinberg. He says of this work, it's glamour rooted in despair, anesthetizing repetition. It's numbing. Warhol states, "The more you look at this same exact thing, the more the meaning goes away, and the better and emptier you feel. I see everything this way, the surface of things, a kind of mental braille. I just pass my hands over the surface of things." Elvis from 1962. See a trend here? If you want to know all about Andy Warhol, just look at the surface. Look at the surface of my paintings and my films and me, and there I am. There's nothing behind it, just surface. He starts to create a art space that becomes a social gathering space for celebrities, important politicians, people in a cliquish scene, but it's also a production space. So he calls it the Factory, 1969, where he hosts parties but also produces screen prints and his artwork and his paintings and films. Go ahead and watch this. This is a good example of how he performs once again as a elusive character. And again here. This is one of my favorites, where he is avoiding answering anything. So he ends up in a defensive way, I think, but also in a way of challenging the interviewer to recognize his own desire to have things a certain way, or to be articulated by the artist in a specific way. So he himself is finding that he's become the commodity that he's talking about. So Warhol, that is, and is becoming mass-produced, mass-consumed. And if you watch the film, the PBS documentary, you saw how he becomes enmeshed and trapped in the exact thing he's critiquing. Another interview. Oh, that one got lost there, but here's another just fun case for Andy Warhol assignments. This one right here, if we can find it again, I'll try to reinsert this, but it's looks like it's unavailable now. It's a video of Andy Warhol eating McDonald's, I believe, hamburger, Big Mac, and again, it's a way of collapsing the way that he as a person is becoming mass consumed and commodified, just like our food is. The Heinz ketchup bottle, the mass-produced fast food, that kind of idea. He's again critiquing and seeing the surface level as opposed to the depth of understanding we're coming to in relationship to our things and our objects. So that's about it for Andy Warhol. I know that shifts us into a darker tone, but I think the main thing here to rely on is this notion of human commodification, understanding how he shifts from taking objects like Coca-Cola and brings us to the same mechanisms, but with humans as the subject.